They will say that I have shed innocent blood. What's blood for, if not for shedding? With my hook for a hand, I'll split you from your groin to your gullet.
Hey guys, welcome back to Spooky Tuesday, a weekly podcast where we're breaking down all of our favorite slashers, thrillers, monster movies, and black comedies on the new scariest day of the week. I'm Sydney Thompson.
I'm Monica Haidt.
And I'm Chelsea Duff, and this week we're talking about Candyman. We teased it a little bit last week. I talked about how I was excited to go over it because it is just such a powerfully gay movie to me. But there's also a lot going on here. There's just, I think this is a movie that really has something to say. And it's not like silly necessarily like a lot of the other movies that we cover are. And so this is kind of going to be more of a Donnie Darko-esque episode maybe, where we try to like talk about this as a serious film, as opposed to going through it shot by shot. But also it's really great and I love it. And there's like just so much here.
Okay. And for anybody that hasn't seen Candyman, one, it came out in 1992. What are you doing? Where have you been? Please watch this movie, especially now.
Yeah, and especially before the remake / spiritual sequel comes out this year. You gotta see the OG.
It was supposed to come out last fall, so thank God we're doing this episode now so that we'll have it on the record when the remake, spiritual sequel, whatever you want to call it, finally drops.
Yes, so this movie is about a U of I graduate student named Helen who is writing her thesis about urban myths in Chicago. And while she's talking to people, she hears a story of Candyman, who is a vengeful ghost with a hook for a hand who will just like rip your shit apart, right?
Groin to gullet.
Yeah, and so if you say his name 5 times in a mirror, he will appear and just like wreck your shit, right? Like he is coming for your throat.
Yeah, I mean
to your groin first, actually, then up to your gullet, then he gets to your throat. But yes,
the procedure, it's like I was gonna say a gross joke about always like front to back, but then I was like, do we need that? And so I'm sorry that I had to say it to tell you my thoughts on how there are procedures for things. You know what I mean? There are procedures. People should know that that's how you're supposed to wipe if
and if you're gonna eviscerate someone, you want to go from the groin to the gullet. You want to go from the groin up to the throat and not the other way around. You're not going to have the right momentum otherwise. It's just the science of it.
Yeah, I don't know why, but that's Candyman tells us this, and he seems like an expert in his field.
100%. Oh my god. Okay, so this movie, we watched it in June or something of last summer with the OG Spooky crew, and in true to life Monica form, I forgot everything that happens in this movie after like the first like half an hour. So it was a wild ride. I was not expecting all the twists and turns, and I was absolutely terrified watching it this time around. Like I watched it with Adam and my roommate James, and I screamed like 6 times, and I also punched Adam full force into his armpit, which was a big deal because he's like stupid ticklish, and so he was furious with me, and then I screamed in his ear at the exact same moment. So this almost broke us up, but worth it. Because this film is honestly like, it definitely has its flaws, but structurally the way that it's shot and like the soundtrack, this film is very artistically and beautifully done. Like opening shot is this aerial view of all of Chicago, and it was like the first time that had ever been done like that well. It was with this like newfangled sky cam, which was a big deal. And like, I mean, it starts out right away with that shot, which was state of the art, and also the incredible score by composer Philip Glass. And I think the music in this movie, like, really takes you there. Like, it's spooky.
The music is, I think, what makes this movie so actually scary.
Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, the sounds can really make or break an atmosphere for you, which is why a friend of mine is like her scary movie hack is if you're getting too scared, you can like crunch baby carrots. You know what I mean? Because like that snap of biting into a baby carrot will like break the tension. And I think it this goes to show like how much when you build that energy around you, it like really influences your mood. And I mean, again, like Monica said, this movie is beautifully shot. There are a lot of like lighting techniques I want to talk about actually later on, and how it like gets into the world building and what I think it is trying to communicate to the viewer. But I'll hold off on that for this moment. But from a sound perspective, it's really beautiful. But what I saw on IMDb is that the composer doesn't even like this movie.
Yeah. Or at least his first take. Like he said now after years and years, he's like, okay, this movie has a cult classic and I don't regret it as much. And also, I'm on his IMDb right now, Philip Glass, and he's doing the movie for the 20 oh wait. It says Candyman short 2020. So I thought that he was doing the score for the new movie. So maybe I'm wrong on that. I'll check myself in 5 seconds.
My automatic assumption at least is probably there was some kind of short to be like, hey, remember this movie, and it borrowed the original score, and so they had to credit him. But I don't know, because what I read from him, and I could be wrong because I looked at one quote on IMDb and then I moved on with my life, was just that he was like, 20 years later, this movie is popular and it still gets a lot of play, so I'm still getting my checks, and that's great.
Yes. So he saw it mostly from a money-making standpoint, which, like, you know, get that bag, Philip Glass. You did a great job. But yeah, like, don't ship this movie. It's not just a slasher, like he says.
Yeah, that was his thing. Is he thought he was making a high art film, and he delivered a high art score. And I mean, yes, he delivered on the score, but I also feel like the movie is there with it. And I don't know, maybe you know, it came out in 1992, like Sydney said. I was 1 month old at the time. Sydney was a toddler. Monica was still baking in the oven. She's still under construction.
In womb.
You know what I mean?
In womb.
So like,
I was just partying in the womb.
So we don't obviously have and can't quite grasp, however, this film was received at the time. But to me, I mean, it seems very much in the league with like modern quote unquote intelligent horror movies, you know what I mean?
Like elevated horror or whatever.
Yes. It feels like it is, whether or not you want to argue it did it successfully, and whether or not you want to argue that it like made the points it was trying to make, I think it was a movie with something to say. It wasn't just like a slasher where the appeal was the kills. I mean, like we just talked about that with Valentine last week. The main appeal of Valentine for me is that the movie has like really creative kills and is fun, and that's a slasher. You know what I mean? Like this was cinema, even if you feel like it was not successful at like sharing the racial message it was trying to get across necessarily. And we'll get to that later too, but I feel like it had a point of view, it had a perspective, you know what I mean?
Totally.
This movie for me is like very on par with Silence of the Lambs in horror, and because it's very subtle. Like I watched this as a teenager when I moved to Chicago. It was one of those movies that like, I live in Chicago, I have to watch it.
Yeah.
And it's very, very similar. It's more a psychological horror movie in a way. Like, yes, there is mild gore.
Buckets of blood for sure.
Lots of blood, but you don't see, except like one killing on screen, they're all like off-screen killings, or like a murder has happened but you don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to wonder if the blood is what gave Mr. Philip Glass that impression. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because a lot of the times in horror movies, there's a ton of fake blood, which we love. You know, I mean, we're obsessed with fake blood.
Oh yeah.
And we're like, give us as much as you would like to. But people see it, and I guess to some degree, they think that's like gory or unnecessary or over the top. I feel like it serves a role. Like, it never feels cartoonish to me in this movie.
Yeah.
And I also feel like, I'm no scientist, but bodies have a lot of blood in them. And it seems like a realistic amount of blood when people have been eviscerated, or dogs
By a
have had their
hook.
heads cut off. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it seems like an appropriate amount of blood, which is what makes it like so scary and realistic to me. The nature of the violence here, because I mean, sometimes you'll watch a scary movie and they're like, we really wanted that PG-13 rating, so we only had like 2 drops of blood, and it's just like, okay, well, I don't feel that person is truly dead.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
they've got like 1 drop in the corner of their mouth, but that's not what this was. Like, it was very trying to be like realistic with, I mean, other than the fact that it's a paranormal film, every other level was trying to be like, this exists in our world. Violence is real. Racism is real. All of these, like, the world is a harsh place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
well,
also like the reason that these kills were off camera was an important plot point of the
Mm-hmm.
film, because like there's confusion throughout the film, like is Candyman carrying out these murders like Helen thinks, or is it Helen who has had a mental break and she's just not remembering doing it? So that played an important like plot point. But yeah, I thought the use of blood was super realistic. There's not even a fine line. There is a point where you have realistic amount of blood, too little amount of blood, and then there's too much blood where it's spurting out like a freaking water fountain. And we were right in the money, on the money for this film.
I like this movie a lot because while it is an elevated horror movie, it still has like some classic horror tropes in
Yeah.
it where like you have a lot of blood, but like you don't see the murders. It has nudity in it, but it's not like exploit ex
Exploitative.
Thank you.
You're
Um
welcome. We donate that word to you.
There's too
Thank
many
you.
consonants in it, so I don't blame you.
I was like, my mouth is not putting this out.
Sometimes, you gotta outsource a little work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's like,
Where
I'll pronounce Nev Campbell from now on, and then
Yes.
it's all good.
But where, Helen she's covered in blood and she's at the police station and they're having her like remove articles of clothing, and you can just like, she is naked, but it's not the like, oh my god, my tits are out, I'm a bimbo, oh, like horror, like naked, typical classic horror trope.
Mm-hmm.
She was not getting naked on camera for the audience. She was getting naked on camera because
For a
that's
practical reason.
Yeah,
Because the
I mean,
cop
there
made
was
her.
like, there was a bathtub scene that like didn't need to be there, but I also, again, didn't feel like that was exploitative either. I wrote in my notes, we could have seen less boobs, but I think the way they handled the boob stuff was good.
It was casual. It wasn't even the full boob. It was mostly submerged. So, well done.
It was realistic bubble bath boob.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on.
Do we want to talk about the setting of this movie? Because the setting of this movie plays like it's its own character in this movie, realistically.
Yeah, and people might not know this. I don't know if I had an awareness of this before we watched the movie. I knew some things about the movie before we watched it in June. I knew that someone plays Candyman and gets covered in bees and gets stung by the bees, and they had a great contract and got $1,000 per sting. You know what I mean? So I knew to some degree like what I was getting into, but I don't know that I realized that Cabrini Green was like a real place until we were watching the movie. And Sydney, you've lived in Chicago. Some of our other OG Spooky crew members have also lived in Chicago. And you kind of threw in that Chicago expertise for a minute there.
Capri Green was a public housing project started after World War II. And if you know Chicago, like geolocations, it literally was like smack dab in some of the richest parts of Chicago. And originally, before the project was built, it was called Little Hell.
That's a bad, ominous name.
Yes, like, so this whole area, and it was run by like Italian gangsters back in the day. Like, it was this huge, huge thing. And Capri Green has I want to say it gets a bad rap. Chicago in general gets a bad rap because people tend to politicize all of the violence in Chicago. And Chicago is the most segregated city in America, hands down, having lived there. It's just so separate. And Capri Green got this whole bad reputation about, drugs and murder. And yes, there was drugs. Yes, there was murder. Um, but it wasn't the people who lived there's fault. It was all of the politics
so
and
many external factors.
all the external factors, environmental racism, actual racism, just like bad. But Capri Green, because when you think about it, most horror movies, all of them were like in the suburbs. Up until then, they were either like out in the woods or in the suburbs. And this one, we get an urban setting in a project that already scares, white people in America. Like, this is its own boogeyman for a lot of people. It like truly sets a great background for this urban legend, this like one that's like specific to this movie, especially when we get into the backstory of who is Candyman.
Yeah, and before we go there, I think that is something that the writer-director, what's his name? Bernie Rose. He specifically talked about that, and let me find the quote real quick. He talked about how, the movie is based off a short story, I believe. I don't think it's a full novel by Clive Barker. Who I am not super familiar with, but I did read a Clive Barker novel again in the 5th grade because my parents let me buy the book at an airport. What were my parents doing when I was that age? Like, I don't know. But so
and
it's
he wrote
based
Hellraiser.
Yes. It's based off this short story that originally took place in England. So it was the writer-director who decided to relocate the story to Chicago. And when they found Cabrini Green and they decided to film there, you know what I mean? It really took on a life of its own within the story. And he kind of talks about how you want to find somewhere that is genuinely frightening, and that really lends itself to creating the aura of fear around the movie. And this was a place that, like, he says people were actually afraid of driving past it, and there was such, I didn't even realize I just plagiarized his words, damn, oh well. I was like, look at me, aura of fear, I'm so smart. No, he said there was such an aura of fear around the place, and I
great minds think alike, it's fine.
You know, when you're like, wow, look at me just whipping out phrases,
knowledge,
this beautiful phrase.
No, you just read it somewhere. That's why you're thinking about it. Anyway, he says, obviously, a lot of the fear, he doesn't say it quite like that, but he said it's racially motivated, but more than that, it's poverty motivated. Which, like, that's where a lot of racism, and fear walking down the street when you see somebody, it's like, oh no, like, I mean, it's a very white perspective, and that gets a lot of play in conversations about this movie out as well. The fact that it takes place at a housing project, the fact that it features the main villain, this like mythological feature, is a Black man, the fact that there are all the other like scary people in the film are Black men other than Helen, that is worth discussing. And a lot of people compare this movie completely understandably to Get Out. There's like a lot of shared material here in terms of the subjects that they're discussing and the narratives they use to like address those. I kind of think they're opposite.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's very much like a Black person's story and a Black perspective. It really is Helen's story, a white woman's story here, and a white perspective. And for it to be pulling on that narrative of like, you're afraid to even drive past Cabrini Green. Like, people who lived in those neighborhoods are not afraid to drive past it. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that, you know, when I lived in Baltimore and people are like, oh, you're going to Baltimore, like, you have to be so careful, like, you can't walk anywhere. You know what I mean? It took me a long time to be like, no, you can. Like, obviously there's crime and you have to be careful, but also it's a normal place like anywhere else. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And it's the same thing what you were saying earlier. Like, within this movie, Candyman as a figure is the boogeyman. Cabrini Green as a place is the boogeyman, and like within our world at large, Chicago is a big boogeyman in the United States. And that's also like a very white perspective.
Totally.
And which makes sense. I mean, Bernard Rose, as far as I can tell, and I don't want to label him in whatever way, but he seems like a white guy to me. And I think tried to say some really good stuff, and I think the movie does a lot of things successfully, but ultimately he's not necessarily going to be the person best positioned to tell a story about the Black experience in America.
Yeah, and I just feel like, you know, I understand his perspective being like, oh, we want to find a setting that is like has that fear factor or whatever. But like the fact that they chose that like just isn't doing any favors to the people who actually live in this area. And also like they literally, the set dressers brought in garbage for this film and scattered it around Cabrini Green to make it look more dirty. The guy was like, yeah, there was a little bit of trash there before, but we brought in a whole bunch of trash and we put it around. And that's the type of thing that makes me so mad, because they're like painting this picture of this place to be even worse or whatever than what it actually is. Reality. And I think that's super unfair. And then they're also like, there's already this boogeyman aspect about it, and then they're putting the boogeyman inside of the metaphorical boogeyman of the area. It's just like a lot. It's just like a lot to do.
It is interesting though, because a lot of the like, I don't know that they are gang members within the film even otherwise, but they're people who live at Cabrini Green and are kind of giving Helen and her best friend / research partner / in my opinion love of her life, Bernadette, you know, they go to this housing project and they kind of get a little hassle, especially because they look like they're detectives realistically.
They're wearing way too many blazers. They're wearing multiple blazers.
They've got lots of coats going on.
Blazers atop blazers.
But the people who are playing those people are like a lot of the real people who lived at Cabrini Green, who like when the crew rolled up and they were like, we're gonna shoot a movie here, they were like, all right, we're not gonna cause problems for you if you let us be in the movie. Kind of in the same way, this was an IMDb trivia piece for Valentine last week. But there was a guy when they were filming outdoor scenes who was just like honking his horn while sitting on the street, and they had to like pay him to stop honking his horn and disrupting filming. You know what I mean? Like, this was a real place where real people lived, and those real people, there's like fully crossover between the reality and this movie, and they like bleed into each other in a lot of the ways that the murders that make up like the mythology of Candyman are inspired by real murders that happened in Chicago. I think literally at Cabrini Green, but maybe a different housing project. But so there's like a lot of there's a lot of like things in reality that are informing this movie, but also they brought in their own trash to scatter around to make it look worse. So that is fucked.
In usual movie form, they're taking the reality and doing a hyperbolic exaggeration of it, you know? And it's just like,
I get it.
They're trying to be so serious and handle something such an important and a topic that needs to be delicately handled, and they kind of like hand some of the shit, or a lot of the shit in it. That's why I'm so excited for this revamp of this movie, because it's actually written and directed by Black people who like can actually do a good job instead of it being from a a solely white perspective, you know.
And I want to talk about the potential plot at the end. Nia DaCosta, Jordan Peele of Get Out fame, is writing with Nia DaCosta and one other person whose name currently escapes me. Sorry to that man. But they wrote it, and Nia DaCosta is directing it. And Jordan Peele's also executive producing, obviously, with his company. What's it called? Monkey Paw Productions? Is that right?
Sure.
I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
Productions? Is that something else? Yeah. Oh my God, I got it right. I'm the smartest girl in the world.
Ooh,
Look
the
at
other
you.
writer is Win Rosenfeld.
Shout out to Win Rosenfeld.
That's a great first name. A lot to live up to.
Anyway, yeah, so we'll circle around to that at the end, and also maybe at that point we'll acknowledge that there are 2 other Candyman films that exist, but for the purposes of this episode, we're discussing this movie as a standalone.
And it doesn't feel like you need any more at the end. Not that I didn't want there to be more, but it's like they wrap it up in a bow, you know?
It comes full circle.
Exactly. But
and
okay,
what I can glean of the other ones, they're like more of a prequel than a sequel, maybe anyways. But what do I know? Let's just talk about this movie since we're here. But we kind of laid it out for you. So it's about Helen, and she's doing this research. The other main characters are Bernadette, like I said, best friend, research partner, love of her life, her girlfriend. They are in love. Do they kiss? In my heart, but not on screen.
They get a little bit close. It feels there's like a close touching moment. And I was just
they have fleeting moments.
There's a really intimate moment after a scene where Helen gets beat up. She's on the mend, and she meets back up with Bernadette. And I don't believe, first of all, that this is the first time Bernadette has seen her since she got beat up, because they're girlfriends, so obviously she would check on her sooner. But they meet back up, and Bernadette is like, first of all, their faces are so close together as they're talking, and they're being so tender, and then Bernadette is like, let me see your eye, or whatever she says, and she reaches up and pulls off Helen's sunglasses, and I was just like, okay, they're married. But in actuality, Helen technically is married to a man named Trevor,
who is the worst person in this movie.
I would hate any man that Helen was married to, I think, because again, her love with Bernadette is so powerful to me. But Trevor is particularly bad, and also his name is Trevor, so no favors there.
No.
He's not helping himself.
It's hard to be a Trevor and be someone that is likable, because it's just too easy to say Trevor with that venom, like Trevor, you know, like that feels really good. Like, try it right now, listeners. Try it, you'll feel good.
I'm not gonna say it's impossible, because I just watched the third To All the Boys I've Loved Before movie, and Ross Butler is very charming as Trevor. He's a nice little boy. So there are good Trevors out there, I'm sure, other than fictional characters. But this one in particular just sucks, and also not because he's a bad husband, although he is a bad husband because he's cheating on his wife, but he's cheating on his wife with one of his students / his TA, and so I have a lot to say about that as well. Trevor, you're a predator, but other than that, you know what I mean? Like, Trevor, first of all, also, the movie opens up with her doing her research, and then she goes and she sits in on his lecture. Her husband is she's a grad student. I don't know why she doesn't get to be a professor also, who's just like working on additional research, but whatever. She's a grad student. Her husband is a professor. She goes and sits on his lecture, and then realizes he's also talking about like urban myths and stuff like that, and urban legend in his lecture, and she approaches him afterwards. First of all, we get to lock eyes with Stacy, his mistress / student / TA, whatever.
Yeah, we get to lock eyes with her, but she won't make eye contact with Helen, because she's like, she's gonna see that I'm fucking her husband plainly on my face. Like, we all as the audience could.
And Helen knew. She knew.
Yes. Okay, but the thing is that she, like, this is just what I'm still on why Trevor is bad. But she's like, Trevor, you promised me that you weren't going to talk about this stuff until next semester because I'm like actively gathering research on it right now, and essentially you're working against me for ruining his wife's career ambitions. But he's just like, Helen, I'm not gonna change my schedule for you and my what's it called?
Lesson
for
plan.
class.
Lesson plan? No?
Yes, but that's not the word that I'm thinking of. It starts with an S.
Schedule.
I want to say schedule, and that's not right either.
Let me...
Syllabus! Syllabus!
Yeah! Thank you so much. We got there. We are the smartest girls in the world.
We are one genius.
The smartest girls you know.
Three beautiful idiots, but if you put our brains together, some real good stuff comes out.
It's beautiful.
But he's like, I can't change my syllabus or whatever. And it's just like, okay, then why did you promise her you would do it next semester? Like, you could have just not promised that in the first place. So not only is he cheating on his wife, not only is he damaging her career ambitions, not only is he lying about both of these things, but he's named Trevor. And he also has friends who are rude. You know what I mean? So,
we meet
his friends are the worst.
Almost right away. He is another professor, it seems, or a researcher, and his name is Purcell, right?
He seems
but he's published.
He seems to be the person who will be maybe reviewing Helen and Bernadette's work. They like go out for dinner, all of the four of them at one point, and he's like, tell me what you've got. And Helen knows that this guy's a dick, so she's like, we're gonna bury you, which may be, again, not the greatest career move. But he's like, actually, do you know what? I know more than you do. And then proceeds to, is it mansplaining if the other person genuinely does not know what's being explained? I don't know. But he's very condescending about it regardless.
Way, for sure. Also, something that you need to like know in case you haven't seen this, to just picture what's happening. Imagine you are talking about something that you are an expert on, and then a man who looks like Benjamin Franklin but is not Benjamin Franklin tries to mansplain it to you. So they're like, sir, you're not even Benjamin Franklin, but you look like him, and that's not a compliment. It is 1992. Please update your wardrobe. But anyway, he is a huge douche, but he does lay some facts upon us that set up this entire film.
I actually have his little speech with Candyman's background described. What we know at this point in the film, Helen's been like talking to grad students, and one of them basically was like, there's this guy Candyman, and like, she doesn't say like Bloody Mary, but we know it's like Bloody Mary, where if you say his name in the mirror 5 times, he appears, and then he, the whole groin to gullet, blah blah blah. And maybe or maybe not, someone's hair will turn completely white. That seems to be an element of the scary
people who
story as
observe the murders that he commits are so spooked that their hair turns white.
Yes, there is Billy in the beginning, who's part of the students' like story. And I don't think Billy's hair went completely white, but he went crazy. And then like there's a little boy,
his hair did turn white, and then he went crazy. Double whammy there.
Wow. There's another little boy, Jake, in the movie who tells another Candyman story, and a man's hair turns white in that too. Anyway, sorry, that's a side note. But so what was I saying? Something about Purcell?
Oh, do you want to read Purcell's beautifully written thing?
Yes, I would love to. So Purcell is the person who's like, this is actually not just mythology. This was like a real historical figure within this world, at least. And he tells us, and I am going to summarize actually because the quote's pretty long. But Candyman was the son of a slave who became a successful artist, basically. He was like raised well, went to really good schools, was very talented, and he basically did portraits for rich people so they could show off how rich they are. But one of the rich people who commissioned him, he fell in love with that man's daughter, and she's white, and he's the son of a slave, so he's black. And people in the area were so upset by this interracial relationship and the fact that he got this white woman pregnant, that they killed him in a really terrible way by hacking off his hand and replacing it with a hook and then covering him in honey so that the bees would come to him and he would get bee stung to death. And then also,
and then they lit him on fire.
yeah, and then they burned his body on a giant pyre and then scattered his ashes over Cabrini Green. And also, okay, here's a criticism I saw of the movie online that I would like to introduce to the discussion at this point.
Okay.
Which is that um they give Candyman this backstory, and he's this mythological figure, but he was this real person. But the criticism was essentially that he doesn't even get a name, and apparently he does later on in the sequels, but there's definitely no name mentioned here. But also the only historical information we get about him comes from this guy Purcell, who's obviously a dick. And so I guess my question is, do we think that Purcell is being a dick and is like has no care for the fact that this was a real person other than the way that it informs his research? Or do we think that the movie did not bother to give him a name?
I feel like it is the movie's fault overall for never giving Candyman's name, which is Daniel Robitaille. That's what it ends up being. It's French sounding because there's an ILLE at the end, but apparently it is silent. I researched this for at least 10 minutes before the pod, and I saw many different ways to pronounce it, but I think Robitaille is the way it goes. But yeah, I mean, the whole movie is about them researching Candyman. So, like, if there's a name to be found, they could have mentioned it in this film, outside of Purcell's annoying mansplain origin story for Candyman.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think, and again, usually when we do episodes, I'll watch the movie and I'll read the IMDb trivia, and that's really the extent of my research. On this one, the movie covers so much ground and has like so many conversations that are about it, that I outsourced some of my thinking, and I read a lot of articles that at least like gave me somewhere to bounce my thoughts off of to figure out like whether I agreed or not. And I think one of them was maybe on The Ringer, but it was about how Helen is really the only person in this movie who's like humanizing the story of Candyman and who Candyman is, which makes sense in terms of who Helen is in relation to Candyman, which we can talk about in a minute. But it feels like a totally appropriate character choice for Purcell to be like, this person has a name, I don't care, because Purcell sucks, you know what I mean?
Hardcore.
But also, it would be not hard to work it in. Like, Helen is clearly doing research on stuff on her own, and they could have had her find this name if they wanted her to.
But I also think, like, he's a myth, know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so because he is this myth, this urban legend, he doesn't have a name. Know what I mean? Like, it is this, like, bigger than the actual story. And so even if the myth was based on a real person, it kind of, like, creates, he becomes bigger than the story it was. So, like, his name is just Candyman. Like, he kind of doesn't have a persona anymore. Like, he is just a boogeyman.
That's true. He kind of says that himself.
He definitely embraces, Candyman himself embraces that his, like, enigmatic, like, I am the writing on the wall, that sort of energy about himself. But, like, I think that the movie, one of its major flaws is from the way they handle his origin story, because, like, the reality of the situation is that Daniel Robitaille was lynched. That's what that was. It was a racially motivated killing. That's what happened. And that, like, his origin story is one of the most, like, justifiable, if you will, origin stories for someone to be turning into a boogeyman that gets you with a hook. You know what I mean? Like, we got
As
Michael
far as
Myers.
things that'll turn you evil, yeah, that's a good one. Because, like, I'd be mad.
Justifiable. Jesus fucking Christ. I mean, like, we've got Michael Myers, like, his story, it doesn't have that same depth to it. Freddy
No,
Krueger
his
is a
story is
freaking
just that
pervert.
he was a 5-year-old who was dumb. You know what I mean? He just was a crazy little 5-year-old. He doesn't have. I mean, maybe I only watched the first Halloween, so actually, I'm not an authority to speak on that.
Either way, there's like some real like emotion and real depth to Candyman's story, to Daniel Robitaille's story, and like they don't really touch on that enough, I feel like, in this movie, because this movie is entirely from Helen's perspective in that like white vision, you know what I mean? So like it's just like a spooky story and you're like, oh, that's so sad, but like it's more than that's so sad. It's way more than that. So I feel like the movie would have been way more poignant if they had focused on that aspect of it more, instead of doing what they did. I feel like they started going down that road, like it could be like a revenge sort of thing, and then what ended up happening was they turned it into some weird star-crossed lovers thing with Helen being the reincarnation.
Here's the thing, though. I liked that. I liked it, and I think that could have been an entry point, actually, to humanizing him as a figure more, because I think, this is just kind of my brain bouncing around a little bit, but they don't give us a timeline for Daniel Robitaille's life and when that is exactly. But let's say it's presumably the 1800s or whatever. It's a long time to be a ghost. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you start out with a revenge mission, and then along the way you kind of like lose track of what you were getting at, and now you're just like, I mean, okay, here's the thing. To me, that really permeated my brain while I was watching it is like, God, Helen has an incredible will to live, because all of this horrible stuff keeps happening, where it's like, oh no, I cut off a dog's head, and I maybe kidnapped a baby, and I maybe murdered my best friend, and you know what I mean? Like, all of these things are happening. Obviously, to her, at least, she knows that there are external factors at play, but ultimately she gets to a point where all these things have happened. Her doctor at the hospital has been killed. She's being charged with first-degree murder. She goes home to her husband. I just dropped 1 million spoilers, and I'm just gonna keep going. R.I.P. But also, we're a good enough amount into this podcast that you've already committed to listening without watching, or you know what we're talking about. But all of these things happen. She goes home. She finds that her cheating ass husband, who sucks and who was cheating the night that she was in jail, has, within 1 month of her being institutionalized, has brought his student TA honey baby into his home, and she's painting the walls all pink.
Okay, if we're gonna bring this up now, I have to talk about this. That apartment before Stacy, or whatever the hell is her name, Stacy. It's Stacy,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Fucking Stacy. We're mad mostly at Trevor, but also Stacy, girl. Anyway,
She sucks.
No, I have things to say about Stacy. I'll save it.
We'll get to that in a second, but let me finish here. I was blown away by the gorgeous shelves that they had in that apartment at the beginning. Beautifully done shelves. Other parts of the decor, questionable. Some appropriative masks maybe going on that I didn't wish to see. But those shelves, incredible, beautifully decorated. And you come in, you rip down the fucking shelves, you paint every wall, freaking like the worst color pink I've ever seen. I'm wearing a pink shirt right now, and I am on screen next to a giant pink water bottle. So it seems like I don't have a leg to stand on here. But I would never paint my house that color. How dare she?
Counterpoint. I love Stacy's sense of decoration. But what I was saying is that Helen comes home, her husband has moved on. It's as if she never existed in this space. You know what I mean? She's got everything working against her, basically. There's no real way out. And there's this moment where she's like looking down at the water. It looks like she's ready to jump, essentially, off a bridge. And then for some reason, she still has the will to keep going. And also, by the way, this is after Candyman has approached her and in his rumbly ass ASMR voice has been like, be my victim. And it's like, he's so sexy and I love him. And the voice rumbling through my ears is directly targeted to me to appeal to me the most that it can, I think, probably. They knew that I had just been born and one day would watch this movie. And so they were like, we're just gonna make this sound so appealing. But he says to her, like, be my victim. You know what I mean? Like, he's really... The thing is that Candyman could gut her groin to gullet like he's doing to everybody else in one flat second if he wanted to, but it's a seduction. But essentially seduction or backed into a corner, arguably, as well. There's just not a lot going for her, and yet she charges on at every point, which is, I feel like, what Candyman is doing. You know what I mean? Like, he says at one point, he's got his whole I'm the writing on the wall, the whisper in the classroom. He says, without these things, I'm nothing. So now I must shed innocent blood. Come with me. To me, that's the same kind of, like, I could fade into the background, and the circumstances have led to the point where, honestly, that would be so easy to do, and yet I charge on. And it's that will to live in some way that, like, binds them both to me. And I think he kind of starts to a degree regain some of who he is and was when he sees Helen, I think. Again, within this movie, we don't see a lot of Candyman that doesn't center around Helen. So hard to say what he would be like if somebody else said Candyman 5 times in a mirror and he appeared to them. But they have that moment where he was like, it was always you, and he has that moment where he's like, allow me at least a kiss, just one exquisite kiss. And part of the seduction is being like, we're gonna be together, and we're gonna be together forever, and we're gonna be immortal in this way forever. I think that could have been an entry point to seeing more of, like, who he is and was as a person.
Totally.
But it just doesn't quite make that leap within this film.
No, I think that they kind of screw the pooch, to put it in such an eloquent way, with that theme, because, like, exactly what you said, like, she could have, like, had some memory or whatever of when she was, because the idea, in case we didn't make this clear, the idea is that she is the young lady that he fell in love with and impregnated back in the day, that led him to be lynched.
Helen. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she is supposed to be that lady reincarnated, which we love a reincarnation theme. Amazing. But it's a little bit confusing, for one, if that's actually what's happening. So it's not super clear. And then,
I think
doesn't
for
have...
sure it is.
No,
it is. Make that argument. No, about
it for
how
sure
it's
is
seen on screen.
It for sure is. It's just their dynamic. There's obviously the chemistry that they have between them, but she's also still, like, super, super, super resistant. It doesn't seem like she has that click moment where she accepts the fact that she's this reincarnation of a person that was in a loving romantic relationship with Candyman back in the day, many, many moons ago, and so when they do have those sort of, like, romantic moments, for example, when he's cradling her in his arms and he goes to kiss her and he just goes to his face and his mouth is filled with bees, if she was, like, really in touch with her past self, she'd be like, yeah, baby, give me that bee kiss. But instead, she is not like that at all. And it just, like, of course, it adds to the horror aspect of this. They're keeping Candyman as this villain, even though he has a understandably horrible origin story throughout. But, like, it just feeds into some of, like, the classic tropes and stereotypes that, like, make that part a little icky for a viewer. It shows you it was pretty 1992 when they made this movie.
I will say, every time he was on screen, and okay, what's his name? Tony Todd.
Tony
is the actor.
Todd? Incredible name, also, Tony Todd.
Incredible name, 6'5", total hunk. Great
Total hunk.
voice, clearly. So much style as Candyman, in my opinion. But also every time he was on screen and okay. Oh, what I was saying was that okay. Like we said, some of the discussions around this movie are about how like the big scary boogeyman is a black man and like what that means, but also some of the discussions around this movie are like, well, why can't the villain be black? And you know what I mean? Like, why can't we have those stories too? And one thing that Tony Todd, the actor, said was like, this is a very Phantom of the Opera role, which is so spot on. It's like the greatest comparison.
Seriously.
Because it's like you are rooting for them as a romantic figure, but also from the outside you can see like how toxic and like not chill this is. And so it's like when he's like, sing to me, my angel of music, he's like, come to me. I want her to, but also, you know what I mean? Helen is the protagonist, and so we kind of don't want her to as well.
And he's just effectively, it would be one thing if he was like, be my victim in the parking lot, and then he takes her in his arm right then and gives her the bee kiss. But there's like a whole half hour where he is like making everyone in her life think that she has murdered a dog, a baby, her best friend, a doctor in a psych ward, like all these different people. So like he's like ripped everyone away from her.
Yeah, it
and
is
isolated her
abusive.
completely. It's an abuse allegory, 100%. He's completely isolated her from everyone in her life, and then he's like, now I'm gonna give you the bee kiss and seal the deal.
Very weird, because he's like, I want you to come to me of your own volition, but also I will kill this baby if you don't. So
he's like, don't you want to be with me, and don't you want Anthony to live?
And Helen is like very, very, very like compassionate to this baby that she's only met once.
Like, well, very cute baby.
You know, babies
he's
are great.
adorable.
Also, Anne-Marie, the mom, is like the sweetest woman in the entire world, and she's trying so hard, and she just had to hear a fucking murder in the apartment next to her apartment, and now her dog got butchered. That was a very cute dog that was protecting her. She's had a very rough time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fully understand what happened there because we don't see it, but Anne-Marie comes home, presumably, and finds her dead dog's head decapitated in her kitchen, and then someone's in the bathroom and the baby is gone. You know what I mean? Like, how unbelievably overwhelming. And we don't know, like, how Helen got there, if she, like, talked her way into the apartment, or if she was, like, watching Anthony or something. We just, like, it's a missing scene. And part of that is painting the, like, how aware is Helen of what she's doing, and is she the one doing it, or is Candyman the one doing it? Is she oh, let me borrow some language from The Conjuring here. Is she a conduit? Ooh, a through line. But yeah, so we just there's God, poor Anne-Marie. I want to see more of her in the spiritual sequel, and I think we might actually. But anyway,
I would love that. And also, like, poor Anne-Marie too. She already was sussed out by Bernadette and this lady Helen. These ladies with multiple blazers on, acting all weird, breaking through holes in walls, and taking like 1,000 pictures of her front door, being very rude. You know, and she like lets them into her house out of the goodness of her heart. And then and the lady's like, this like crazy fucking white lady is like, oh, your baby is so cute, and then a week later she comes back and fucking chops your dog's head and takes
and the baby's gone.
Yeah, she's like,
classic
I trust
baby
someone
snatcher
one
story.
time, and this is what I get. Poor Anne-Marie. Also, that actress's name is Vanessa Williams, and that threw me through a loop. So I think it was before SAG made you have different names. Because there's that other actress, Vanessa Williams.
It have to be like Vanessa P. Williams or whatever. The way they make you toss an initial in there.
That name would work really well with an initial in there. So the Vanessa Williams that you immediately think of, she's going to have to go through a rebrand, because this Vanessa Williams gets to keep her name. But yeah, she's such a great actress, and like especially in the fire, what is it called? Bonfire. There you go. Scene at the end, you just get that look of her face, and you can just see that pure like uh just distress that she's going through, and it just absolutely was heartbreaking. Do you have anything that you would like to say, Ladybug?
Hello, my cat has joined the podcast right now.
We didn't know we'd have a special guest today, but surprise, Ladybug,
Leela,
tell us how you feel.
chime in.
I think what Ladybug wants to discuss is the police in this movie. I think they play a very important role, especially when race is involved. One, all the police that why am I blanking on her name? Helen. When Helen gets arrested, Ladybug.
She's agreeing with you.
I mean, I am a conduit of what she wants to say right now, so it's okay. We see, so earlier in the movie, there is a scene where Helen is in a bathroom and she gets knocked in the head by a man who is like using Candyman's image to be probably menacing and threatening, like, hello, I heard you're looking for Candyman, bitch. Like,
carrying around the hook and everything. I mean, like, it's menacing. That's why it's working so well for the actual Candyman, so we can't blame him.
And so she gets assaulted by this man. She gets assaulted by this black man in Caprini Green, and they have to do a lineup, and she picks out the man, and the cop that she's dealing with is like, yeah, we think he's the one that killed the woman that was being blamed on actual Candyman. And they talk about how, like, we knew it was him. We've been trying to get him. He's been a gang member, but, like, nobody has been willing to cooperate with us because they know we cannot protect him. But, like, we have you now.
Yeah, no one was willing to testify.
Yeah, and so it's like, we have you, a white woman, willing to, like, do this. We can arrest him. And then when she, after...
I just realized if she's crazy and dead, their whole case goes away. Oh no.
Fuck.
Damn.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
Ooh,
Like,
the
cop
justice
was
system
extra pissed when he arrested her, because he
Oh.
was like, "Fuck you, lady! I
Wow.
just got my case that I've been working on for years, and now you're not a viable witness."
Damn. Well, they did not explore that further in the film. That would have been an interesting story to tell. But there's already a lot here. They were a little preoccupied trying to, wrap up the Candyman-ness of it all to get into Candyman 2.
But we
Candyman 2 is that man, by the way, not Candyman 2 the movie. Sorry if that was confusing for anybody.
Oh, okay. But
Fake
we also see these same cops who, when she's been arrested for, like, breaking, entering, like, almost, I think abducting a baby and killing a dog, like, she gets let out. She does not get...
What was
right,
that
know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
assuming it was bail, like, no nothing, but she is just, like, let out and done all these things, and I think, that says something about how our criminal justice system treats, people.
What they said in the movie, the rationalization in the movie is that they were hoping to find the body of baby Anthony, and so they didn't want to charge her with kidnapping and hold her on that charge because they wanted to charge her with murder. But also, she arguably murdered a dog. Why can't they charge her with, like, animal cruelty or something and then throw on additional charges later? I don't really understand enough to know, though, so maybe
if they don't know where the baby is, and she knows where the baby is, and the baby's still alive, and they let her out, she could go kill the baby. Just saying. That's a big, huge possibility. That's a huge part of it that they're not thinking about. Of course, we know
Right?
that she didn't do that, but they don't know that. They think she did it.
But then she goes home and she's dealing, with all this, and then Bernadette dies. Candyman, like, she kills Bernadette. So, like, if they would have kept her in jail, Bernadette would not have died. And then at that point, even though like they suspect her of Bernadette's murder, instead of like throwing her in jail, they put her in a psych ward, which, like, she's kind of cuckoo. But if she was Black, she would have just been in jail the first time, no questions asked. And then, here's the thing: she's in that psych ward for a month.
A month.
A month. And so I want to know how Candyman is keeping tiny baby Anthony alive for a month.
Well, we saw him stick his finger in the baby's mouth at one point, and the only conclusion I can draw is that he's like feeding him little bits of honey at a time, perhaps. That's really the only answer that I have.
Babies really thrive on the honey diet. This is something, it's coming up. It's on the up and up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys know that about babies, but I'm a medical professional. So I am also a trained detective, which is why I know that the cops did a piss poor job when they were looking for baby Anthony, and they said they locked Cabrini Green down as an apartment building because he was in there. I mean, we don't know. Like, maybe Candyman can like hide him from people. Maybe if somebody went in there, Candyman would be like bloop out like into a different spectral plane of existence. I don't know. But it seems like he's right there.
This is straight up Black Christmas all over again. They are in the attic. They're in the attic. Right. That is literally where they are. And the police are like, "What's an attic? I've never heard of it. We've swept the entire home and there's nothing there." No, there's like 3 dead bodies in the attic right now. In this case, there's a little baby who is alive and crying all the time, being held by a man with a hook and being fed only honey for a month. Who needs your help? Like, this doesn't make any sense. I was confused about that too.
I think they released Helen and Helen killed Bernadette, but I think Bernadette, unfortunately, much as I love her, was always gonna go. And that's because Candyman is in love with Helen, and we know Trevor is no competition, but Bernadette is out there, and she's got Helen's love, and if anybody could save Helen, it would be Bernadette, and so Candyman knows that she is a threat to him, because, no offense, again, I think that Candyman is very tall and sexy and well-dressed and has a great voice. But Bernadette is, like, right there. You know what I mean? Like, she's the perfect woman.
How can you choose? It's hard to choose between the two of them. They're both so sexy. And one has a hook all the time with him, which is something that is a big... And access to honey.
I would say, though, I would not like to be fingered by Candyman. So
okay.
I mean, there is one moment. Actually, I was gonna be like, don't say that to me. But there is a scene where Helen is lying down and the hook goes under her dress, and I didn't like it. Didn't care for that. Not for me.
I was very scared. I was like, it was under there for a while, and it went very far under there, and I was like, what is happening?
Why?
Under the skirt right now? What is happening? Actually, I don't want to know. Actually, don't tell me, but also, please, can away. I was like, I'd rather have the bee kiss. Let's have more bees. Let's have exponentially more bees and way less hook in the vagina. That's what I'm thinking.
Yep, I would not like to be fingered by Candyman. So, Bernadette, you the girl.
Bernadette,
my pick.
Okay, first of all, Bernadette is also just like a voice of reason. Like, they're looking into this, and Helen starts to be like, actually, Purcell, we're gonna bury you. And Bernadette is like, what are you doing? And then they show up to the Cabrini Green apartment building, and Helen is like, this is fine. And Bernadette is like, we look like police officers. We are not going to get a friendly reception. And also Helen is like, let me just look in the mirror and say Candyman's name 5 times. And Bernadette is like, I know better. I'm only going to say it 4 times and then I'm going to walk away because that is tempting fate. And then they're, again, sorry, I keep saying this, but they're at the apartment buildings and she's like, let me just climb through a hole in the wall into this decrepit apartment where someone was murdered tragically, and there's like all of this garbage and graffiti and all kinds of candies with razor blades in them and stuff. Speaking of urban legends, you know what I mean? And Bernadette is just like, no thank you. And then not only was Bernadette relatable as hell because she was like, I'm not going in there, she was also like, I don't want to stand here the whole time waiting. I'm going to sit down because sitting is great. And she doesn't sit on her own coat. She gets Helen's coat and she sits on Helen's coat. And she's like, mess up my coat? Absolutely not. Mess up my girlfriend's coat when she's already being a fool climbing around these things. Clearly she has no regard for her nice clothes. And first of all, her very sexy brown leather gloves. Just that incredible detail. So much. Virginia Madsen as Helen is also not the perfect woman because clearly she's got a lot of troubles, but so
flaws.
stunning,
so beautiful. She looks just like Gillian Anderson, but how Gillian Anderson looks now.
Mm-hmm.
Not what Gillian Anderson looked like in 1992 because couldn't look anything alike at that point. Also, we have to give mad props to Bernadette because she wears that adorable Blossom-esque hat at one point, and that truly blew me away. A velvet blossom hat. Love it. Style icon. Truly beautiful. Also, Sydney, earlier in the pod, you're comparing this movie to Silence of the Lamb, and our girl Bernadette played a very similar character just the year before in Silence of the Lambs. She also played the best friend.
Can we give her own movie? Cassie Lemons? Kasi?
Cassie? I want it to be Cassie because I like to say that more, but it could be Casey too, and we love her either way. And Lemons is a very iconic last name. A lot of really cute branding she could do there. Really quick side note, the girl at the very beginning of the movie who tells the story about Billy and Clara, is that her name? I think so. The babysitter, her name in the film is Monica. Just saying.
Ooh.
It's exciting for me. No one would ever know that unless they look at IMDb, but I feel heard and seen, and I love it.
We're like an hour in, so we need to get to our regular segments soon. But before we do that, one thing that I want to talk about that I touched on a little bit earlier is the idea that she is the reincarnation of this woman from the real Candyman as a human person's past. And I think we get that in a couple of different ways in this movie, other than obviously Candyman being like, it was always you, Helen. And I will say, when we first watched this movie in June, and I saw that scene, at first I thought he was just saying, like, no, it really was you who did all of the killing. You're a bad person. But then eventually my brain caught up. And so when I was watching the movie this time, I was really paying attention to that. And there's a lot of scenes where, okay, one thing I read on IMDb is that they did hypnosis with Virginia Madsen, the actress, at first, so that she would really seem like she was under Candyman's spell. And eventually at some point the actress was like, that's creepy as fuck, we gotta stop doing that, which she's right. But that really comes across in moments. And then there are moments where I don't even think they were doing the hypnosis thing, but you get that same kind of it feels like she does not have this awareness of whatever this past life is, but you can tell that it's there under the surface somehow. Like when Purcell is giving us this backstory, and they do this, there's kind of some technical on-screen moments, and in addition to you can see Helen the gears in her brain turning, there's also this thing they do where they shine this light, and it's just over her eyes. The rest of the lighting kind of dims, but you see this highlight on her eyes as she's hearing about Candyman's background for the first time. And you can also hear the screams as if it's like the real sound from when, what did you say his name is? Daniel
Robitaille.
Robitaille. When Daniel Robitaille is being attacked, it's almost like that audio, we're getting it in that present, as if Helen on some level does have kind of like this memory of it, but she thinks she's like imagining it, you know what I mean? And we get that at other moments too, where it really feels like she's almost like having a PTSD flashback of this experience that she just can't quite access. But it's part of how the movie shows you that like there's something going on in her head that maybe kind of brings it into the real world too, but it's because we see Bernadette get the light on her eyes treatment at one point too when she comes face to face with Candyman, and it's the only other point in the movie that I noticed it. But it's also, we see it later at the end with Trevor, the way that their voices like resonate and like rumble through the movie. Like with Candyman, he's got this ASMR ass voice. I didn't even have to listen with my bone conduction headphones on, and it felt like he was whispering right in my ear.
Oh
you know
my
what I
God.
mean? That first time that he shows up,
Bone chilling, but like good. But it
In the
feels
best
nice,
possible
It's
way.
like I'm so scared of you, but also if this is how I have to go,
But
thank
also,
God. You know what I mean?
yeah. First of all,
his fur coat in this movie, the greatest.
incredible,
It's so
iconic.
good.
Very
I mean,
beautiful.
if you've heard our Black Christmas episode, you know that we're clearly obsessed with fur coats to some degree. But he just looked absolutely amazing. He shows up, the way his voice rumbles through the movie is just like a ghost. He reached through my physical form into my body and touched me on the heart. And it just was beautiful, and I loved it. And the second he was like, "Be my victim," I was like, "Okay, go on, Helen. What are you waiting for?"
I was like, this is not usually like my style. Like if someone, like if Adam said "be my victim" to me, I'd punch him in the face. But when he says it, I'm
You're
like,
like,
well, maybe I'll die today.
It doesn't sound that bad.
No, give me a bee kiss. Come over
Do it
here,
in a
big
heartbeat.
boy. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I wrote in my notes. I was like, God, Candyman is hot. If Candyman looked like this and wore that and said, "Be my victim" to me, I would simply say, okay. But Helen, that will to live, she's like, no, I'm going to keep. I mean, good for her, I guess. Couldn't be me. It's like when people say with zombie apocalypse movies where they're like, how do these people. I would simply not try to survive in an apocalypse scenario. Like, I think probably I wouldn't. It's too much.
I don't want to survive in
I'd
an
try.
apocalyptic scenario. I'm just going to be like, no, goodbye.
It seems very tiring.
It would be very tiring, but I would love to like see myself in a Mad Max Fury Road type scenario, just how I'd like put it all together, So I'd give it my
Yeah.
darndest, but like I also am the same person who crashed my bike into a pole for basically no reason just a few months ago and broke my collarbone. So like, will I survive long? No. Definitely.
But I'm going to try.
I'm going to give it my darndest. That's what I said at the beginning of this pod, and that's what I'm still going to keep doing, even if you guys turn into zombies.
Yeah, I would just be a zombie.
That's
I think I'd
beautiful.
just be like, you know what? Sure.
What are you going to do?
Can't beat 'em, join 'em,
and eventually
baby.
Helen gets to that point too.
Yeah.
Eventually Helen is like, okay, Candyman, I give in. Let's do this thing. Because, I mean, the will to live can only take you so far. And also she wants to save Anthony. You know what I mean? She goes back to Cabrini Green. She's like trying to really save him and do what she can to undo all of the harm that she has created intentionally or otherwise. Like, obviously she did not mean to kill Bernadette because she would do anything for Bernadette, in my opinion. But also she did say Candyman 5 times in the mirror, and Bernadette told her that was a bad idea. So just saying. And then again, when she's at the hospital, she's like, I can prove Candyman is real by summoning him right now. Like, girl, maybe consider, like, what did you think was going to happen other than Candyman showing up and gutting the doctor? Like,
Like,
Is that
did
what
you
she was
think
trying to
he
do?
was gonna show up and like wave his hook around
And
like,
be like,
"Hey,
hey,
Doc, see, I am real"?
I
No,
know.
he doesn't even show up in front of the doc. He shows up behind the doc and guts him from the back. He doesn't do the groin to the throat method. He goes back route, which seems worse and too many bones, but he still makes it work because he's a
Yeah,
professional.
Candyman knows what he's doing.
But
Yeah, no, because at the end, this movie has so many twists and turns. The end really, really, I forgot all of it. And I really also completely forgot this whole thing with the pyre, the big bonfire at the end. Because okay, in the book version that we were talking about before, called The Forbidden by Clive Barker, it's set in Britain, and so the giant bonfire makes a lot more sense because it takes place on Guy Fawkes Day, which is also called Bonfire Night, and everybody makes these huge giant bonfires all across England, and it's super fun. Great night to party. But that doesn't happen here in the States, so it's just like, oh yes, this is just the big pile of trash that they brought in as set decor.
which is also, wait, what's so funny about it to me is the bonfire stuff is already there earlier in the film, and Helen's like, what's this for? And Jake, the little boy, is like, we're having a party. But they just like, she goes to the hospital and she finds out she's been in the hospital for a month. They just like postponed their party. You know what I mean? They were just like, they either got ready so ahead of time or they were just like, yeah, there's been a lot going on. Like, there's a baby missing. Like, maybe we hold off. Which,
wasn't
you
really
know,
a party vibe. That makes sense. That makes
respectful.
sense.
I appreciate it. And also maybe Jake is actually a powerful voice in the community because clearly he waits until he sees Helen's little hook going in to be like, Candyman is here and he's in there, so let's light this baby up. And we're gonna bonfire Candyman for a second time. And everybody listens to him. He's like, Candyman's here, and everybody's like, oh, it is time for the bonfire. And they all rally outside.
Yeah, like such terrible timing for Helen here. Like she somehow can like divinely hear this bebe from many, many, many feet, meters, I don't know, away in the middle of a giant pile of wood and couches and stuff. Crawls in, and the last possible second that Jake could see the hook, he sees the hook and rallies the troops. And I love that he's a small power player. Also, that little actor, his name is Dejan Guy, and my bad if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. He was known as One Take Jake on set because he was an iconic little baby actor, and every scene that he produced was pure gold. And
he
I
killed
just want to
it.
put some shine on Jake because, like, he's such a great part of this movie.
He's
little
so
thing.
good in this movie.
Yeah, so, Helen's having a day. She's climbing through all the trash. She finally finds Anthony, little baby boy. She's so excited. And then, of course, our guy, Candyman, puts her back in that loving embrace and says maybe the creepiest line that he gives this entire movie. And let me find it. Let's see.
Is it the allow me at least a kiss, just one exquisite kiss? You're mine now. Tonight our congregation shall witness a new miracle. They will abandon you. All you have left is my desire for you. I'm afraid. Do you fear the pain, or what is beyond both? The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, there's nothing to fear. Our names shall be written on 1,000 walls. Our crimes told and retold by our faithful believers. We shall die together in front of their very eyes and give them something to be haunted by. Come with me and be immortal. And then, you're mine now. It's time for a new miracle.
That was not it, but that also is really creepy when he says that. What I was trying to say is, and I can't find the exact quote, but he grabs her and he said, I knew you would come here to me, something like that. He said, now, like, we will die together, and our ashes, basically he says, like, our ashes will be, like, co-mingled together, so we'll never be apart. And that was just, like, the worst possible mental image for me. Like, imagine, like, you're gonna die, and the person you've been running away from for, like, a whole movie has you in his embrace, and you're gonna die by fire, and literally your bodies will be physically becoming one in ash for the rest of eternity, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, Ha 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 ha. We'll have a fire themed nightmare tonight.
No,
Thank you.
thank you.
But Helen won't quit. She never quits. And she's like, "You're trying to have me turn into ash with you? Hell no." And she grabs a flaming stake and stabs him in the chest and takes little baby Anthony to safety while completely igniting on fire. And I will say that though this film is beautiful and it does a very good job of many things, there's a point where it shows Helen and her hair is on fire, and it's the fakest shit I've ever seen in my life. I was like, that wig is like a granny wig. Like they found like granny wig for Halloween, and they put that on her head.
Maybe her hair turned completely white because she saw Candyman, Monica. Have you considered that?
Yeah, that's probably it. And then, I mean, her hair turned completely white and then completely burned away. And also her ear was gone at the end, which was a detail that was well done in makeup, but very disturbing to see. So that's great for her. And then, she gives this baby back to Anne-Marie, and Candyman dies. And when he dies, burning bees explode out of the pyre, which I really enjoyed that part too. I thought it was artistically done, artfully done.
A masterpiece.
Oh, yes, actually there are two things that I want to say about the ending. First of all, did he want Anthony to be their baby to replace the baby that he was supposed to have with her? That's a question that I didn't ask myself until after I had watched the movie for a second time, and I was like, hold up a second, that is so sad. Because I was like, why won't he let Anthony go? And then I was like, he wants his baby. He's got this little baby right here.
Especially like when she was holding Anthony, and then Candyman was holding her from behind, and they were all snugged up, and I was like, family portrait.
Aww.
Aww.
But also another thing about the end that I want to talk about is the funeral scene.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what to make of the funeral scene, so I need you to tell me.
I also didn't know what to make of the funeral scene, because what we see is that Helen's getting laid to rest, and the priestess trying to be like, she sure did kill people, but she wanted to be good. And the only people really there are like Trevor and Stacy and I think Purcell, and then like one other rando.
Freaking Benjamin Franklin.
But then you get a little parade of Cabrini Green residents walking up with Jake and Anne-Marie leading the charge, and they bring a hook that they put in the grave site, like in the
they throw it onto her coffin. Yeah. They throw Candyman's big hook onto her coffin.
Hook, because Candyman's is attached to him. She's got her own hook now. And they put it with her, and I couldn't tell.
Candyman's hook. I thought it was his because it had like all the big chunky stuff at the end and the nail. I thought because he supposedly like burned, and so I thought it was maybe them being like, "Yes, Candyman was real. Here's this hook." I don't know, but I don't know what it meant.
Okay,
I have no idea what it meant.
That's a good point though, because I was like, are they condemning her by being like, take your hook after you gutted all of these people, or were they paying homage to her by being like, you gave us what Anthony back, and for that, like you did terrorize a community, but also you did what you could to save this baby at clearly great cost to yourself, and we want to recognize that, or I mean, if it was Candyman's hook and not the hook that Helen had, that's another really interesting element where it's like reuniting them in the grave in a way.
Yeah, I felt like it was them being, because like the people of that area all believed in Candyman already. The stories like had already been going around over there, and so I thought it was them being like,
you kind of like,
it was him.
You fought Candyman, you died, but you saved my baby because she's the one. Well, her and Jake are the one to like lead all of the people. Because then,
and arguably Candyman is gone now. I mean, they burned him for a second time, and I guess we don't know really if you say Candyman 5 times in a mirror if he'll pop right back up and be like, "You can't get rid of me that easy." But she also kind of takes over as the new resident mythological urban legend boogeyman
like she gets her
figure.
own mural painted. Which gross, but like I don't like that she now has a mural of herself looking like an angel.
Like an angel of all things.
Yeah, like, there's obviously a bunch of points in this movie where you're like, why are you doing this? Like, this makes this extra cringe. And I feel like the end definitely went there. Like, from just like a movie, like not thinking deeply perspective, I fucking love that Helen comes back and she's a spooky lady with a burned head and she just absolutely massacres her lying, cheating son of a bitch ex-husband, Trevor. I almost called him Lyle. Who's that? I don't know. Also a name of someone that we don't like. Oh, that's their last name. Okay, I'm not crazy. Trevor.
You're so
whatever.
smart.
Oh my god, thank you. Like, from that perspective, I was like, yeah, get him, girl. Like, spray his blood all over those Pepto-Bismol ass walls. Like, please do that. But
girl
in the
boss
context
moment.
Be your own girl boss.
Go off. No. But like in the actual reality of the film, I thought it was a pretty cringe choice because like Candyman is the guy who's got all of this lore and all this power and everything, and it was like about him. But then like it looks like they painted over his mural and put up a painting of her, and I don't like that. It seems really messed up.
The movie's called Candyman. Obviously, Helen is the protagonist, and also she's the entry point for the audience, but it could have been that she's the entry point to Candyman's story. Instead, this is very much Helen's story, and that's like compounded at the end when it's like Helen is the spooky figure now. You say Helen's name 5 times in a mirror, and she will come to fling blood all over your beautiful pink apartment with a giant paperclip on the wall. And poor first of all, Stacey is an icon, and she deserves better, and I'm glad that Trevor's death will give her the chance to move on. I hope she's not too traumatized, but also don't sleep with other people's spouses. But that's just like a general thing. But I don't know, because okay, we've discussed how the Candyman Helen relationship is like a romance, and I wanted it to be romantic, but also it has a lot of like very clear abusive tendencies in it, and so it's like, I wanted them to be together at the end. Like, I wanted it to be true when he says like we'll be together in the immortal plane or whatever, but also you kind of don't, because he's backed her against a wall to put her in the position to choose that. So it's like, and then also he burns in the funeral pyre and she crawls out. So in a way she has like physically escaped him. So it makes sense that they're not together. But also I wanted it to be like Candyman and his bride. I don't know.
I just feel like the writing in this movie bungled it enough that like that wasn't like an option that would have been received well from the audience at the time or whatever. They made it so abusive and so creepy that like that ending, I guess, would have been scary in its own right, but I think it was fucked up and super stereotypical what they did, and another big flaw with the film. So I don't know. The ending was epic in its own ways, but also like I did just say they wrapped it up in a pretty bow at one point earlier in this pod, but that's not true. Like they could have done a lot more with this. There was a lot more to be done. Okay, so we've covered the beautifully strange and sort of lacking ending of this movie, but let's get into our normal segments here. I feel like the first one, Could It Be Gare? We've already kind of yes, we've deep dived into this. If there was some lip locking action between our Bernie and our Helen, Truly, this
Even
film
if
would have really changed for me.
Yeah, even if they just like kissed each other's hands or cheeks or something, you know what I mean? That would have gone a long way for me. But if they had kissed on the mouth, first of all, I would have instantly perished. But I wanted it so bad. Like I said, when I introduced this movie last week, this is one of the first spooky movies we watched where I legitimately forgot when I was watching it that Bernadette wasn't actually her girlfriend and was just supposed to be her platonic best friend and that she had a husband. Like, my brain just mentally erased Trevor every time that he wasn't on screen, and I was like, no, Bernadette's her girlfriend. And I had to unfortunately keep being reminded every time Trevor popped back up that he exists and he is married to her.
Ugh, horrible reminder. But yeah, this movie does a lot of legwork that it doesn't maybe know that it's doing for the gay community, so thank you. But also, like, fucking seal the deal. My God, don't leave us out here like this.
Let them kiss.
Maybe they'll kiss in the afterlife. But that's not enough.
I don't know how I feel about that either. Now that Helen's a baddie, Bernadette maybe should become be with somebody who didn't contribute to her death. But that aside, you know what I mean? They are in love, and I love that for them.
So, next segment, Matthew Lillard. I don't want to put him in this movie, and that's how I feel.
Wait, I've got ideas. Okay, as you know, for the Maddie Lily segment, sometimes I like to do the whatever age Matthew Lillard would have been at that time. And in 1992, this was a couple of years before Scream, so he's young. He would go on later in his life to play a high school student, so it would be hard to slot him in too many places at that age, but he could be Billy from the urban legend story at the beginning, Bad Boy Billy. And he could also be one of Trevor's TAs, which would have been like a realistic role for Matthew Lillard to have actually had in 1992, where he's just cast as like an extra in the background. You know what I mean? But then later on, you watch that movie and you're like, is that Matthew Lillard? Like when I was looking through our Valentine screen grabs that I took for social media last week, I was like looking at the bullies from the dance and I was like, oh, that's Mickey Milkovich from Shameless. You know what I mean? Like they could have popped in a 20-year-old Matthew Lillard as one of the college kids, one of the TAs. But I also thought if we're talking
22 at
yeah,
this time.
oh yeah. Perfect college student extra age. But if we're talking adult Maddie Lily as he is today, I thought he could be good as Dr. Burke, where he like kind of has to play it small and subtle, which we don't get from him a lot, where it's like that kind of restrained delivery. But I know he has the range for where he could bring that like kind of condescending energy that we kind of get from Stu and Scream and some other roles. You know what I mean? Where Dr. Burke clearly sucks within this movie. And I think adult Maddie Lily could have delivered on that kind of sinister energy without it being too big. And I thought he could fit there. But I would really like to see him as Billy, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, especially because that guy who played Billy was not cute. Sorry.
He had a very strong nose, but he also... Clara was really working it, and he was not. He doesn't look like a bad boy.
He did not have bad boy
leather jacket.
Also, like, they were supposed to be like high school students, right? And he looked like he was 35, and I was like, this is poor casting.
Yeah, I mean, she could have been saving herself later in life, and just an adult who's babysitting for a friend's child, but yeah, the implication was clearly
worse if she is babysitting a child as a full-fledged adult and she takes her top off in the living room and like runs through the house like that where there's a baby sleeping. Like that
babies don't know things.
True. It's true. Hopefully Anthony and that baby dies. Hopefully Anthony doesn't remember any of this trauma and his month living off of only honey. So he lives to grow up without that type of scariness going on.
Okay, so the best segment of all is our dumb bitch segment. And I have some thoughts. I want to run them by you. What do we think of Helen as the dumb bitch.
She does say
Yeah.
Candyman 5 times in a mirror and then summon Candyman later on and then be like, oh, he killed somebody. What? It's like, Helen, my friend, my beautiful lady,
Like,
please
girl,
pay
we've been
attention.
telling you this the whole time. You just willingly chose to not listen to the people.
Yeah, I feel like she's definitely like probably structurally in the film the dumbest bitch of all of them because like her actions lead to the most carnage. So like similar to that guy in Blair Witch who I will bring up every dumb bitch cuz I still hate him. I talk about this during the week. I brought this up to Adam on Friday when we were in Joshua Tree and we got lost in the desert and I was like this is just like the time when that guy threw the map away. But anyway, I feel like Helen does the most bad grammar. She does the things that cause the most harm, and so she's definitely the dumb bitch. But also, Lyle, not his name, Trevor is also a big contender for the dumb bitch.
Yeah.
I hate him.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Also, I know, and you guys didn't bring it up, and I know you weren't going to, but I would like to address the Stacy hate in this chat because, again, pink walls, giant paperclip, neon sign in the kitchen, fridge full of only beer. To me, she's an icon. But that aside, she's there in her. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna get too into my Stacy love because I do love Stacy, even though she's made some mistakes. But she's like Tree in Happy Death Day, where it's like she's got room to grow from this experience. She's gonna be a good person if she just Groundhog Days her way through it. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the only dumb bitch is Trevor, and I wrote it in my notes as I was watching the movie, and the moment that I said it was like, of course now Trevor's crying in the bathroom missing his wife. Like, of course now he's like, Helen used to make me dinner. Like, of course now he's looking in the mirror being like, oh, Helen, 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 Helen. And I think that was 5 times, but honestly, every single time that they started to do the repetition thing in the movie, my brain immediately was like, I don't know how to count, and I don't know how many times they've said anything. So maybe that was 5. I don't know, but
it was 5.
It just felt like, thank you so much. I'm so just intrinsically good at saying things, and that feels not true because I just really struggled in that moment there to say anything at all.
To be clear, I meant that Trevor said it 5 times. There's no way to know how many times he said it. I'm sorry.
He did say it 5 times because I went back and I counted because he does one Helen and then he goes, oh, Helen, and then he says Helen 3 more times. Which, first of all, one of the articles I read was like, he deliberately summons Helen and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, he didn't. He's just a dumb bitch. And he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's like, oh, my sexy young girlfriend who never wears a bra and puts paper clips on the wall she's no Helen. Which, first of all, she's not, because she is a young woman out on the world on her own for the first time. Like, Helen, nobody could be Helen. But I don't know. I just was like, fucking of course, as soon as Trevor Lyle realizes he's ruined his marriage and it's not his fault that this Candyman thing happened, but also I feel like he didn't help,
He drove her to Candyman by being an unresponsible husband, a liar. And
yeah, I mean, before she was at the end of her rope where she was like, okay, fine, Candyman, I will die with you. She went home, and it was only once she was like, my husband has moved on without me. In 1 month, he moved his side piece into my home and repainted my walls.
Okay, but also, don't forget the best part where she gets arrested for murder, and she calls her house to be like, Trevor, please come bail me out. I've been arrested, and it's 3 a.m., and he's not home.
And then when she's like, where were you? He was like, I was dead asleep, bitch.
Liar. We saw the bed. It was empty.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, maybe they're perfect for each other because they're both dumb bitches in their
Don't
own
say that.
right. Let me finish my sentence. They're both dumb bitches in their own right, so they do have that in common. But Trevor Lyle, whatever his name is, Trevor Lyle is a piece of garbage trash, and I wish that he had been burned in the pyre. And
Here's the thing.
that's
I
just
think
how it
Trevor
is.
is
He does get
trash,
it.
but I think Helen is the dumb bitch.
Uh-huh.
I'm willing to go either way on this one. I feel very strongly about both.
Because the force of my hatred for Trevor is so real and so strong and so powerful. But also he's just making like normal human mistakes, and Helen is making like giant paranormal mistakes.
Yes.
But also you can't totally blame her for not thinking the Candyman myth is real. You know what I mean? I don't think I've ever done Bloody Mary in a mirror. You know what I mean? But also, I
bet you fucking Sydney has.
Oh,
good. Thank God. Thank God. I was just with all your Ouija stuff. I was like, she's probably summoned a demon, and I've hung out with her. And now the demon could find me, and this has ramifications for others, Sydney. But thank you for not summoning Bloody
You're
Mary. I
welcome.
appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, I think to some degree, Helen introduced this into her life on her own. But also, I get it. And also, they're meant to be together in their own way on some level. So I kind of think she would have been drawn into this Candyman plot no matter what, if she's truly the reincarnation of his lost love. But she did kill Bernadette, who I am desperately in love with. So I'll give it to Helen. I'm ready to hop on board.
Yes.
It does make me sad because I'm so glad that Trevor died. His death was the best in the movie, and it was also so bloody and so gory. And also seeing little bald burned Helen show up to be like, look, you little bitch. Like, I loved that. But okay, I guess grand scheme.
But it's Helen in the end, honey. It's Helen. Freaking Trevor is a little ant. He's a peon. He's nothing.
It was
he
always
is
Helen.
insignificant.
Okay. Wow. Okay, I'm fully on board. You've convinced me 100%.
Okay. Well, now we got to get down to it. What are our knives out of fives here? Because this is a hard one to rate.
Yeah, here's the thing. On IMDb, this movie has a 6.6 out of 10. And on Rotten Tomatoes, it has 76% fresh from critics and 62% fresh from the audience. To me, those seem kind of low because I think this movie is so incredibly scary. And
true.
People at the time, I don't want to be like, this was so great at its time and it just seems clumsy now in hindsight, because people at the time were calling it out. And so I don't want to like Chris Harrison it being like the lens of 2018, you know what I mean? But I do think it's still such a good movie, you know what I mean? For all of its flaws, and it certainly does have flaws, and it certainly is not as successful or graceful handling the race issues as I think it wants to be or was trying to be. But I also think it is so wonderfully scary and has such great atmosphere that I want to give it like a 4.5, I think.
Damn, that's a great score. That's really good.
And also, I'm in love with these lesbians. You know what I mean? So
no, totally. That inflates it quite a bit. Let's see. I mean, artistically, like I said, and visually and sonically, if you will. Sonically in many ways. Sonically because of Philip Glass's score, which was like going to church, and then it's a really scary sermon. But also the sweet, sultry sounds of Tony Todd's voice are its own beautiful music, you know. So that's a big plus as well. This movie, I think, is really, really great. I think it tries to do a lot, but I think it fails to do a lot, and it's an innately like flawed film because of that. And I think the plot itself is really, really interesting, and there's so much world building that they do with Candyman himself, and there's so much more that could be done with it. So like, just that in and of itself makes me want to give this a pretty high score, but also dock it because it doesn't take it all the way there. So I wouldn't give this more than like a 3.888888 repeating, but I do think that it's like iconic, influential, but I also think that some of the things that it does were negatively influential for the world. So gets a big minus for that. But that said, I'm so excited to see it redone in the 21st century. Is that the right thing? In 2021, how about that? And see what they do with it. So that's me. What about you, Sid?
I think this movie, even though it does have some things that like are kind of icky, I think it aged really well. And I love anything based in cities that I've lived in, and I love Chicago so much. So I love that it's set in Chicago, and so I will give it a 4 out of 5. I love this movie.
Nice.
It's rewatchable. It's a good time every single time. Like in the last 6 months, I've watched it 4 times. Like that's aggressive.
And it'll make you scream. So, I mean, if for some reason you got this far and you haven't seen it, please reassess your life. But, like, also
That's true.
watch it. Because it's
The
so good.
scariest
It's
moment-
so scary.
We didn't even mention the scariest bit, so people will still have that moment preserved for them. If you've made it
You're
this far,
welcome.
hopefully you haven't, because we did spoil the whole thing.
Everything.
But
Every
some
little
people
part.
like to read the Wikipedia summary before
Me.
they watch the
It's
movie.
me.
You know what I mean? Like, maybe you're one of those. There you
We
go. Maybe you're a
respect
Sydney.
you. Yeah, maybe you're a Sydney or maybe you're a Monica, and if you hear one spoiler, your whole brain explodes and you start screaming and yelling. So, again, no spoilers. And don't tell me that I spoiled it for you if I did, because I'll cry. But, okay, that brings us to the end of our beautiful Candyman conversation. Can't wait to discuss the new one when it eventually comes out, if we ever get to go to theaters again. And maybe one day we'll look at those sequels. But for now, we're pretending there's just one. So what are we doing next week?
We are covering The Roommate, which
The
features 2
Roommate.
girls that look identical. 2 different girls that look
So
exactly
similar.
alike. Minka Kelly and Leighton Meester.
Lil baby Gossip Girl Leighton Meester.
Of 303 collaboration fame. Don't forget
No,
about her
that was
Bring
Cobra
Pop Music
Starship.
career.
Excuse me.
What? I thought it was 303. Oh my
Good
god.
girls go
Wait,
let
bad.
me-
No, that's Cobra Starship, baby.
Good girls go bad. It's a great song. It's a great song. And thank God we're so bad at singing that we won't get copyright infringement from that little excerpt for you. But yeah, I mean, I've not seen this movie. I don't know if you guys have, but I have seen the trailer and it blew my brains out. I couldn't understand how excited I was for a film. I sent it to you guys and I was like, we must, and everybody else has already seen it. So I'm hoping that it's as good as the trailer, but Leighton Meester, will you
I've
deliver?
seen
We
it.
don't know.
It's been a while, and I only remember like the base premises of it, which is like 2 girls live together and look identical.
Yeah, this movie came out my senior year of high school. I think probably I watched it like freshman or sophomore year of college. So it's been nearly a decade at this point. So I don't remember it that well either, which is to say that I just looked at the IMDb cast list and was like, Ally Michalka's in this movie?
Oh, what?
Yeah, apparently. Didn't remember that. So hopefully a lot of surprises to be had. I hope it's good. Genuinely don't recall. But I do
feel
remember
like-
that I watched it and that they're both cute. That's all.
I feel like it's gonna be a fun romp regardless. You know, we'll have
Yeah.
a great time with it, even if it's trash garbage fire. So
I think it might be a bad good movie. We'll see.
So if you guys liked what you heard, please go onto Apple Podcasts and rate us 5 stars, 5 knives out of 5s, and leave us a glowing review. If you didn't like it, just forget what I just said. Thank you. Also, please follow us on social media at spooky_Tuesday on Twitter and Instagram. There's some absolutely beautiful content and even more coming towards you this week. We've got some great screen grabs from this movie. And if you're still on Facebook, good for you. And look us up at Spooky Tuesday Pod.
Bye, spookies.
Spooky Tuesday was created by Monica Haidt, Sydney Thompson, and Chelsea Duff, and edited by Sydney Thompson. Our gorgeously spooky tunes are all thanks to Tamra Simons, who you can follow on Instagram at Captain Tamra, and our podcast art is by Mary Murphy, who you can find on Instagram at the_moon_OMG.
We have a bargain.
But I'm afraid.
Do you fear the pain? Or what is beyond?
Both.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, there is nothing to fear.